Quand j'étais petite, quand j'avais à peu près 6 ans, j'habitais en Californie avec mes parents, ma sœur. Et mes parents, ils voulaient essayer de m'apprendre à prier. Donc ils me faisaient tous les soirs pendant une petite période. Ça n'a pas duré longtemps, mais bon, pendant une petite période, je devais me mettre à genoux à côté de mon lit et mettre mes mains ensemble et réciter une petite prière. Et c'était une prière genre Notre Père ou je ne sais pas quoi, je me souviens plus. C'était un truc classique pour les enfants aux États-Unis. Et je le faisais pour leur faire plaisir, mais je ne comprenais pas du tout pourquoi je devais prier à un homme invisible dans le ciel. Ça n'avait aucun sens pour moi. Alors un soir, j'étais couchée dans mon lit après ça et j'ai regardé par la fenêtre et j'ai vu la pleine lune. Et toute seule, j'ai commencé à prier à la pleine lune, enfin prier, à dire mes pensées, à faire ce que tu fais quand tu pries. C'est une sorte de télépathie avec l'objet de la prière. Enfin, je ne sais pas comment dire ça, mais bon, j'ai prié à la lune. Et après, j'ai tout à fait ressenti que c'était normal pour moi de faire ça, ou bien de parler à la nature, parler pas à haute voix, mais parler dans ma tête, quoi. C'est quoi que j'ai tiré?
Emotion. Des voyantes, des Madame Soleil, des sujets psy, des médiums, des astrologues, des cartomanciennes, des hypnotiseuses, des guérisseuses, des télépathes, des femmes à part, des féministes radicales, des lesbiennes politiques, des anarcha-féministes, des communistes et des ouvrières en colère, des grévistes, des résistantes, des vierges rouges, des communardes, des pétroleuses, des affranchies, des somnambules, des hystériques, des folles alliées, des viragos, des putains, des putes, des filles de putes, des femmes sans enfants, des mères infanticides, des lesbiennes mères, des filles mères, des castratrices, des avorteuses, des femmes avortées, des salopes, des dangereuses, des femmes fatales, des goules, des vénales, des entretenues, des cocottes, des célibataires, des asexués, des androgynes, des transgenres, des transboys, des transgirls, des pansexuels, des butch, des high-femmes, des intersexes, des hermaphrodites, des mutantes, des cyborgs, des handicapés, des femmes musclées, des femmes fortes, des femmes bodybuildées, des femmes testostéronées, des durs à cuire, des bikeuses, des camionneuses, des femmes actives, des femmes de pouvoir, des femmes intelligentes, des bas bleus, des femmes intellectuelles, des militantes, des artistes, des femmes précaires, des clochardes, des marginales, des ménopausées, des femmes vieillissantes, des vieilles peaux, des femmes en chair, des femmes obèses, des érotomanes, des femmes à barbe, des femmes voilées, des stripteaseuses, des hôtesses de bar, des alcooliques, des mélancoliques, des meurtrières, des femmes violentes, des femmes à hommes, des misandres, toutes des mauvaises femmes, toutes des sorcières.
My name is Starhawk, and I'm an author and an activist, ritual maker, priestess, and witch. I have been working with the imagery of the witch and concepts for many, many decades now. For me, I first became involved with the idea of being a witch back in the 70s. I was in college and a friend of mine did an anthropology project on witches, and we met some people who were witches, and they said that witches were actually the remains of the pre-Christian pagan religions of Europe, the earth-based spiritual traditions, the healing traditions. And for me, that was kind of a revelation. They also talked about witchcraft as being a religion of the goddess. And the idea for me of a deity that you could imagine in female form was pretty radical. I was raised Jewish, and there was not much focus on women, on the feminine, there certainly were no goddesses. In the time I was raised in the 50s, there weren't even any women rabbis or cantors. You might be a Hebrew school teacher. So that was just amazing to me as a young woman. They also said in the old religion, sexuality is sacred, and that really appealed to me in that era of my life, and that nature is sacred. And it felt to me like this was what I had always believed. I just didn't know there were other people who also believed the same things. So I became very interested, started studying. And then after a few years, my life changed. I moved away. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I ended up moving up to the Bay Area, and this was in 1975. And here there was a whole community of people who were practicing various traditions of witchcraft. And I got very involved with the community, and I also started my own group in that time. That was mostly people who, like myself, had been activists in the 60s around the Vietnam War, around civil rights and other issues. And in the 70s, we were kind of wondering, how to bring our activism together with this other piece of ourselves that had a hunger for something spiritual, or something that was a deeper connection. And we formed a group eventually that called itself Reclaiming, because we were always saying, oh, well, we're reclaiming our magic, or we're reclaiming the goddess, or we're reclaiming our power. And we finally just said, all right, well, Reclaiming, that's the name of the group. If you think about the witches as being the ones who carried on the old indigenous traditions in Europe after Christianity came in, and they survived for a long time. I mean, they still survive in places. And they were the herbalists, they were the ones who held the traditional knowledge of the land and when to plant and when to harvest and when to sow and those things. They were the elders, like the medicine people. What happened in the 16th and 17th century is that the church unleashed persecution against everything that had to do with the old religion. There were a lot of reasons for that, and a lot of them were economic and social. In some ways it was a time very much like this time, and the witch persecutions functioned very much like the war on terrorism does today. It created something to focus people's resentments on other than the people who are actually in power. So the impact of that, I think, was huge on the European psyche and history. It was like a major cultural trauma that was enacted for hundreds of years that made people feel like anything connected to that old understanding of the natural world as sacred was somehow suspect. that anything that was connected to the idea that the world was infused with life and with sacred value was dangerous and was either demonic and satanic and evil, or then later became something that was ridiculous or irrational or suspect in that way. And I think some of our, conviction that rationality is only what can be quantified, and that really comes from our discomfort, that goes back to the witch persecutions, to that split, our discomfort with our own intuition. It was also an attack on everything that women represented, on the values that women traditionally both held and were assigned, of nurturing, of caring for the next generation, of healing. All of those values, I'm not saying that women innately are more nurturing or caring or healing, but women have carried those values throughout culture. And when women are devalued, those values are also devalued in favor of the values of aggression and conquest and power over. I think the word power in English means many, many things, but it comes from the same root as pouvoir in French, from potere, originally in Latin, which also means potency, which also means ability to do, to make things happen. We experience power that many times we experience power as power over, power one person has to control another, or control their resources, or impose punishments or sanctions, or control their actions. And I think a lot of times we're in resistance to that kind of power. But there's also power in this, more the original sense of the word, of ability, of creative power, of spiritual power. And when we talk about empowerment, that's what we mean. We mean helping to further that kind of power in people. There are ways to exercise power that are not oppressive, that are not about power over. And that leadership can be something that's shared in a group, that can be fluid. It doesn't have to be, a rigid role that confers power over to somebody. But I think of leadership more as helping the group move forward. It's a role of service. It might mean helping, seeing a path for the group to move on to, and suggesting and encouraging people to take that path. Or it might mean sometimes listening for who else in the group might have a good idea, and affirming and reinforcing that voice, and helping other people's voices to be heard in the group. It might mean helping the group move through conflict and mediating, finding ways for the group to work more harmoniously. So if you think of leadership in that way, then there's opportunities for many people to exercise different kinds of leadership. It's not just one big leader. And I think when we fear leadership, and we fear to allow anyone to have any authority in the group, what we do is we disempower everyone, because if nobody has license to use power, then nobody actually has any power. I think as witches, we stand for some of the values that are really key to resisting this current crisis, but even beyond that, I feel like we are really called to build a powerful movement to help our culture and our society transform in its basic ways of thinking. That we need to go back to the values that indigenous people hold and have always held, and that are also there in our European roots, in our own indigenous traditions. that say nature is sacred, that those things that sustain our lives, like air and fire and water and earth, are not commodities to be bought and sold, but they're sacred entities to be protected and to be shared and to be enjoyed by everybody. I think if we can make that kind of shift from this worldview that sees everything as separate, isolated objects to a worldview that is relational, that sees the whole world as a web of relationships, then we have a hope of transforming our technologies and our economies and our cities and our food growing and our ways of living and everything else in the ways we need to do to counter climate change and to counter the immense environmental degradation that's happening all over the world. If we don't do that, then we don't have a whole lot of hope for survival, for civilization. Certainly in its current form, it's completely unsustainable. If we do that, then I believe we actually can have a world that works better for everybody.
I was born in Turkey 30,000 years ago. I taught the women and the men the things that they should know. The patriarch made it, and I was forced to roam. I am an ancient matriarch, a long way from my home. C'est l'histoire de la déesse mère